Hello, Sophie. Lovely to see you. Emily has childcare issues. So we have a really interesting question. Hello, my husband always fails to do something special for my birthday, despite me having told him my expectations many times. He leaves it too late to get any meaningful present to do anything of significance. This year, he even said to me the night before, I don't know what to do for your birthday. No present cards for the children, etc. When I show my upset, it's like this brand new information and he seems surprised. I've begun to hate my birthday. His parents separated when he was 9. His mother is always late or sometimes doesn't send a card or gift. Is this a pattern of behaviour rooted in his past? He is a lovely husband and father in all other ways. Gosh, I think everyone would have a story about presents, don't they? Like
Symbolic.
It's very symbolic and quite a kind of ritual. And I think, one of the things is I think we do take the behaviours that we learned as a child about presents and Christmas and birthdays and celebrations into our present. But also I think people often unconsciously behave around presents in a way that they don't behave at other times. So I read a psychoanalytic paper which talked about giving presents as an attack on the other person, as a way of expressing your fury or rage with the other person that you can't at other times. I mean, that is very psychoanalytic. But I can hear how painful it is for her because she really minds about her birthday. And she hasn't been able to communicate that to him. So it's really frustrating and painful for someone she really loves.
Yeah, a bunch of things went off in my head. I sort of had in my head thinking of there's sort of two avenues she could go down. I echo Mum in the sense of I think there's a very much, because we first experienced them in childhood, I think they very much bring up childhood stuff. So I would say yes to her question. It's very likely that's the case, but you might not know the specifics of what it means to him exactly. And so I would say you've got two kind of options. I don't know how accessible it is for you to have meaningful emotional conversations with him, whether this is a block or whether actually having conversations about the past and how we make sense of that and how you make sense of that is possible. If it is, I would switch the conversation to it really matters to me about having presence of like to the conversation of like, it's so interesting that I've told you this quite a few times and yet somehow this keeps happening. And not as an attack, as a curiosity of like
to explore.
To explore with him, like, what do you think happens for you that somehow this is so hard to hold on to? Because I can see that it's not maybe important to you or you feel funny about it, but it is important to me and it seems like it's really hard for you to hold that in mind. And that's where presence and things like this become symbolic, because a lot of it is about being held in mind and being thought of. And so if it's possible for you to sort of, for a moment at least, put aside the hurt, not that it's not valid and legitimate, but open up to the curiosity of the conversation with him, you may then get much more of a sense of like, clearly there's something blocking him. If he's a loving and responsive partner and husband, there's something going on. And maybe there's also something going on between you. Is this pattern happen in other places where you really want something and then he struggles to deliver? If that's like an avenue that's not open, because as much as you have a loving relationship, communication in that way is not something you really easily do, then somehow you need to take some agency of the situation of how to make your birthday feel good rather than repeatedly wounding yourself of expecting him to do it differently, and he doesn't. So if that's an option for change, then can you buy your presents for you, give them to him and wrap them in advance and then get them? It's sometimes I think we can make it more complicated if you really want
by wanting it to be a surprise.
Yeah. Or plan things with other people on that day that's special and go, do you know, this isn't the way that, it made me think of the Languages of Love book.
Yeah.
And maybe presence, which is one of them, is not his language of love. And maybe you can mutually acknowledge that, like, this is just not his language of love and this isn't something that's about to change. So what are his languages of love? Is that something he can do on your birthday that isn't presence, that still makes you feel attended to? Can he cook you a nice meal? Could he do something that doesn't require pre-planning and buying stuff? So those are my main thoughts.
I think those are really interesting thoughts. And I think to kind of pull it out a bit further, that I think there's so much psychological burden in presence that we don't kind of fully recognise. We kind of think of it as this happy, nice thing. But actually, there's a lot of hurt, when someone gives you a present that's really about them and not about you. And you look at this thing and you think,
How could
what
you?
were you thinking?
Here I am.
Yeah. And I mean, my mum was good when we were children, but by the time we were kind of 18, she just couldn't be bothered with presents. And so, as you know, so if we got recycled things from that were in her house, that
There was some extraordinary presents
there
from
was
the
some,
GMR.
and I got one present one year that I opened the box and it said Darling Pauline, which is my mum's name, love James. So she gave me the present Dad had given her. And for me, I actually found it funny, but I think that was because I was in a loving relationship where I felt like my present needs were met in another way. And I kind of saw it as mum being eccentric. But I think for some families, they can be attacks, that like the psychoanalytic view that it's an attack. Like, I don't care about you. I'm not going to think about you. I'm not keeping you in mind. I'm going to give you some old rubbish that I never wanted. And I can't even bother to look inside. So it can really hurt people. And I know at Christmas, there's this whole kind of agony of presents, I think, between families, between different family cultures, between how much money you spend. And people say, I just want a thought. And then you give them the thought, and then they actually want something that was bigger. And so I think that this is right. And maybe you won't agree with me, so I think really when you're giving presents to people that you really care about, is that maybe we can have a curious conversation about presents and the culture we come from with presents, what people expect from presents, what presents mean, so that there's less opportunity for hurt and misunderstanding.
Yes, I think it's always helpful to tease out the meaning, isn't it? I also think in our family, and don't know what people will make of this, the way we solve this problem is we send each other what we want in advance with a link.
Yeah.
Please may I have this? And
then you share it.
And then
like
you share it. Or a list to the family of like, any of these would be lovely. Which does, there's like the little burden of like putting this together, and there's a slight loss of romance of the surprise. And sometimes someone gets you a surprise, but it does take a lot of the complexity out of it. And
the disappointment.
And I don't know if this is true for our person writing in, but also sometimes the people are bad at getting presents. It's because they're scared of getting it wrong. They don't know what you want. They feel like they don't know what they're supposed to do. So they might do, this is the sort of thing I might do. It's like, look. No, that's not right. That's not right. That's not right. And then put it down again. And then and then avoid it because I don't really know what to do about it. And then, it's the day before. Because there's a worry of wanting to please, and then the worry of getting it wrong. And so that can make people not do it.
I mean, we were with friends the other night with a couple, and the husband said, I never get it right. I get it wrong, and she changes it every year. And so, to talk to you, Soph, I mean, that is a perfect example of, like, say what you want, and you may not have the delight of a surprise, but often the surprises are disappointing. So, if you're weighing up the risks and benefits, maybe just be very explicit. But I'm sure a lot of people will disapprove because they like surprises or they like the thought, and ours is quite transactional. But it works for us and we don't get hurt and upset. So anyway. So thank you for your question. And we'd love also to know your thoughts about presents on the reel and the Instagram. Put in your thoughts around this, because there's a lot that we haven't said that we'd really interested to know what you think. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Thank you for your question. Do please share this if you think it's someone that you want to have a discussion about presents with. Obviously do please rate and subscribe so that we can be found by more people. And until next time, thank you.